of the Westin in Uptown Charlotte. For those watching online, you'll notice that we have welcomed Syracuse into the room. We'll remind the room that if you have a question for the Orange, please identify who it is that you're addressing the question to, and also identify yourselves and the agency that you are with. So with that, we'll get started. First question from the room will come from who? We've got our first to the left, towards the wall, about the fifth row.
Coach Brian Murphy with WRAL. Commissioner Phillips was up here earlier and talked about expanding the NCAA tournament. I wondered your thoughts on if the event should be expanded. He wants to add some more AQs. Some more at-larges.
I really couldn't understand that. I'm sorry.
Question was about the expansion for the tournament. Jim Phillips this morning was asked a question about the possibility, his thoughts of expanding the tournament. The gentleman's asking.
Oh, the NCAA tournament?
Yes, sir.
Well, I had that idea 30 years ago. I've been knocked down every year I ever brought it up. I stopped bringing it up. Everybody thought I was an idiot, so. It took 30 years, but I guess I'm maybe right now, huh?
Do you have a follow-up to that?
The main thing is there's so many more good teams now that it should be an easy move, an easy decision. I like the argument that people say, well, it'll dilute the tournament. No, it won't dilute the tournament. It'll get some more teams in, and the bad teams will be out after one round. So how does it dilute anything? How does it dilute the tournament, or how does it dilute the regular season? It doesn't. It doesn't dilute it at all. You have to remember when it was 48 teams, there was only, 200. There was a lot of schools that didn't really emphasize basketball back then that now do and have for decades. So it's an easy move. I have my doubts it'll fit because it doesn't fit in the television window. You got the Masters there.
Other questions for Syracuse from the room? We're going to go to our right, about midway through the rows.
Hi, David Thompson, USA Today Network. This is for Coach. Just curious, in this off season, how often you've been talking with Coach K, and if this week feels a little weird and maybe a little sad not to have him around.
I haven't really. We never really talked that much in the off season, except when we worked together, and he's busy. He's gardening and stuff with the grandchildren, and I told him, I said, when it snows out, what are you going to do then? But he'll be fine. I think he felt the time was right, and that was clearly something that happened. But when I play Duke, I really don't worry about him too much. I worry about the guys that are out there on the court. They're the guys I worry about. But he brought a lot to the college game, more than anybody probably. And as did Roy and Jay Wright. Those guys are, hard to replace, but as we all know, there's nobody that's irreplaceable. And life goes on.
From the podium for our student athletes, Joe and Jesse Urich, returning starters. Joe, describe Jesse's game. Jesse, describe Joe's game.
Yeah, Jesse's obviously a really skilled big man. He's 7 foot and can do a lot of things around the rim. Catch it with both hands, shoot it with both hands. And a lot of times as a guard, it makes your job easier because you feel like you can throw the ball anywhere near him and he's going to go catch it. So he's really skilled. He blocks a lot of shots as well on the defensive end. So he's a good, a big piece to what we do. And obviously he's going to have a big year.
I would just say Joe brings all the energy we've always had on the court. I remember my freshman year, Joe was starting pretty much like one of our first games, and I remember as freshman, it's always like you got to get used to things, but Joe went out there, made some big shots, and got everybody fired up, and I was like looking at that like, yeah, that's how you got to play. And yeah, he's a floor general. He spaced the floor really well. And yeah, it's always easy to play with him.
Joe, where does that energy come from? Where is that fire? Where's that spirit stoked from? Where's that confidence?
Yeah, I think it just goes up the way I was brought up. I graduated with 12 cousins, and we were always competing. So it seemed like everything I was doing, whether it was actually a competitive basketball game, a competitive football game, backyard football, or pickup basketball, everything we wanted to do was just win. And whenever I'm out on the court, I kind of have to, I'm not the biggest guy, the fastest guy, or the strongest guy, so I have to kind of figure out different ways for me to get a competitive advantage. And sometimes it could be psyching myself out and trying to bring more energy from myself and just get myself a little bit of competitive fire in order to get an advantage over the opponent.
Thank you. Other questions from the floor for the Orange? Coach, as you look around, things look a little bit different in the gym, in the weight room, in the arena. 2 less Boeheims. What's that been like for you?
Well, I miss him. It was great coaching him, but this group has been so much fun to work with because of these 2 veterans here, and Cy and Benny. The 4 veterans have really done an unbelievable job. I think that with these 2 guys, I think Joe is probably one of the most underrated players that I've coached in terms of the respect he should have and what he has. He's been one of the best guards in the league, numbers-wise, since he came into the league. And I don't really think he's gotten the appreciation he should have. I think when he moves over to the 2 most of the time this year, I think he's free to be a better, more offensive-minded than he has been because he had to run the team. So I think he'll be a different kind of player this year as he was when he had to play last year in the Duke game without Buddy. He had 20 in the first half. I think Jesse showed last year, his last 7 or 8 games, he averaged 16 and probably 10 or right in that number in the league. And I think was just kind of starting to come into his own. So to have these 2 guys is very important for our team. But the young guys, some freshmen are really not ready to play and contribute right away. And it's unusual to have 6, and I feel that the 6 freshmen can contribute right away. Obviously, some probably more than others, but I think they can all contribute, and it's what will make us, I think, a good basketball team at the end of the day.
Got a question in the very back to the left. We'll hustle a microphone that way.
Hey, Jim. Pete Yakabelli with the Associated Press. So many things about college basketball have changed through the years. How have you been able to adapt to all the changes and still do what you do at a high level?
Well, coaching is a yearly adaptation from the very beginning. When you first start, there's always something that changes, whether it's the three-point line, the different emphasis people have on things, freshmen being eligible. There's always change. There's more change, probably 10 times more change in the last 2 years than has ever happened in college basketball, college athletics, really, with the NIL and the transfer portal. Somebody asked me earlier if I was going to play the young players to keep them in the program, and the answer is no. You play the players that are going to win games, and if they're young, that's good. If they're not, that's the way it is. But those 2 changes are the biggest things that we've seen. The NIL has become a monster. It was a great idea. It is a great idea. If you kept agents and boosters out of it, it would be a good idea now, but it's not. And so now we have a whole different thing than what anybody would have imagined a couple years ago, unless you're one of the few people maybe that's smart enough to understand when you let boosters get involved and agents get involved, which I think some people thought was a good idea a couple years ago. It's not a good idea. Not a good idea. So it's different, you adjust to it, and you get ready for the season.
Jesse, from the podium, you spent time over the summer competing with the Belgian national team. What were your biggest takeaways? What did you learn?
But the biggest thing I took away was probably the professionalism with which all the guys and people on the court handle themselves. They've been doing it for so many years, and you pretty much learn from anything they do, whether it's in practice or preparation. Whether it's stretching till 9 p.m. or whatever crazy things they do. You just take little things and try to bring them over here and see where you can implement them, and just maybe bring a little bit of that back to the college game.
Questions from the floor for Syracuse? Joe, I'm interested, leadership. How do you describe it, and how do you describe your leadership style?
I think leadership is something that people show and kind of tell. And I think with this year with the young guys coming in, the best way to kind of bring them along with you is to kind of show them. And Coach does a really good job of mentoring them, but also the assistant coaches do as well. So when we're in our groups and we're working with GMAC every day, there's a lot of young guards out there. I try and tell them what Coach Boeheim may like, what he might not like, what GMAC might like, what GMAC might not like, and try and tell them what to do. But I also got to show them. So I can't just tell them to do something and then not do it myself. So I think the biggest thing about leadership is helping guys along the way when they need help, or even just stepping in if they need it, and also showing them the proper way to do it. Because if they see someone else who's been there for a while and do it, they're likely to follow.
As we finish our time together, what is it that Coach Boeheim likes, and what doesn't Coach Boeheim like?
Coach Boeheim likes good basketball. He doesn't like bad basketball. And if you play the game the right way, usually you'll be pretty good.
Syracuse, thank you very much. Have a great season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, Georgia Tech is due up next at the top of the hour.